Guys, they make cool anime too! I've made it no secret that me and anime just don't mix. But that doesn't mean I can't find a series that I gel with and end up loving. Of course, with a series like Kinnikuman, I really wasn't struggling to make a connection with it. It's the wrestling anime. I love wrestling. Anime is fine. We were gonna make it work somehow. Kinnikuman, or Ultimate Muscle, as you're more likely to know it as, has never been a series I gave much attention to. But recently I decided on a whim to check out the latest series released last year. The damage has been done. I love this series. In such a short space of time, it's become one of my favorite anime. And there's honestly not a lot that really competes with it for the spot of my favorite of all time. I don't often like to just indulge and be a fan, but if you'll allow me, I kinda just want to talk about Kinnikuman. Kinnikuman is the creation of Yuta Tamago, a writing team made up of Takashi Shimada and Yoshinori Nakai, though the two are so linked that it's perfectly reasonable to just refer to them by their team name. That team name, by the way, means two different things depending on who you ask. If you ask Nakai, it's because they were eating boiled eggs when they decided on the name, as Yuta Tamago means boiled egg. If you ask Shimada, it means the smell of a fart. This sets the stage for the rest of their careers. Those careers began all the way back in 1971, with the pair's meeting after Nakai transferred to Shimada's school in Osaka. The two were both avid artists, but it was Shimada who pushed the two to pursue manga creation as a hobby. Many of their manga from this early era has been lost, but we know it was well received, winning various amateur manga awards, leading up to 1978, when the pair had a chance to publish a piece for Shonen Jump. The two would go on to publish the most important work of their lives, and one of the most important pieces of art in manga history. It was a one-shot superhero manga based on a character Shimada had been working on ever since elementary school, Kinnikuman. The manga itself is a parody of Ultraman, and I made the mistake going in that meant, oh, it's kinda like Ultraman, but Ultraman farts, right? No. Actually, in Kinnikuman's story, Ultraman's dad had an affair with an ugly woman, and that spawned his bastard child, Kinnikuman. Kinnikuman then tries to fight giant monsters and earn his family's approval, only to fail time and time again, ending up in jail. Shonen Jump editors at the time didn't like it, and said it was too childish and stupid for their book, pointing out his worn-out crotch and how he flies by farting as examples. But the general public loved it. Shonen Jump had no choice but to get Yuta Tamago to serialize it. But there was only one problem. They had to get their parents' permission. Yuta Tamago began a series that would shape manga forever at only 17 years old. Barely even in college, and they were already serialized. Kinnikuman would start as a series proper in 1979, with a storyline that followed the original one-shot structure, fighting monsters and doing a bad job at it. It would introduce Kinnikuman's new mom and dad to replace the Ultraman characters, as well as his new sidekick Meat and rival Terryman, trying to make the series more than just an Ultraman parody. By chapter 28, though, the pair had decided to integrate another one of their loves into the manga, wrestling. Following the smashing success of the Chojin Olympic arcs, the series would lean way more into wrestling, as now instead of fighting kaijus, Kinnikuman would fight evil wrestlers from all over the world, and eventually across the galaxy. The series would only get more popular after getting incredibly unpopular with the American Tour and Seven Samurai arcs, as they would introduce the Devil Chojin, a new team of evil wrestlers who worshipped Satan and wanted to take over the world. The Devil Knights arc introduced an even higher class of Devil Chojin before peaking in my favorite original arc, the Dream Chojin Tag arc. Once that was finished, Yuta Tamago would attempt one of the longest shonen arcs of all time, Scramble for the Throne. This arc is so long, at over 100 chapters, it rivals some of the longest One Piece arcs. We're talking an arc so long that the original anime was cancelled because they kept putting out bad filler arcs to try to give Yuta Tamago time to finish it. Oh right, Kinnikuman had a massively popular anime adaptation to go along with it, which ran from 1983 to 1986, before picking back up in 1991 to adapt Scramble for the Throne. Along the way, they would introduce some of the most popular characters the genre had ever seen. Robin Mask, Wars Man, Buffalo Man, Ashura Man, and Neptune Man. Hang on! That's just Hulk Hogan. How did they get away with drawing Hulk Hogan in a mask? Well, that's the beauty of it. Yuta Tamago didn't draw him. In fact, they barely drew any of the new Chojin. Only Kinnikuman, Meat, and Terryman were designed by the original authors. Every other wrestler in the series was a fan-submitted design. They'd take fan art of people from all over Japan, clean up the best designs, and insert them into the manga. This wasn't just a groundbreaking decision back then, it's still unheard of to leave the designs of so many important characters up to fans. But imagine what it must have felt like to send in a design, then see them in the manga fighting the heroes. This wasn't the only thing Kinnikuman innovated on. I've called it one of the most important manga ever made, and I mean it. Without Kinnikuman, your favorite shonen series either looks entirely different, or doesn't exist at all. I can't be 100% certain that Kinnikuman invented all these tropes, but I can say for sure that it popularized them among manga readers. Kinnikuman popularized the power of friendship, main characters having a favorite food, teams of cloaked villains that could be revealed once they finally decided on a design, character-specific laughs, tournament arcs, reformed villains joining the heroes. It introduced the concept of power levels. Buffalo Man had a power level of 10 million. Alright, he's dog-walking Frieza till he busts out the final form. A short list of the authors who loved reading Kinnikuman when they were younger and cited as an influence on their later work include Eiichiro Oda, Akira Toriyama, Yoshihiro Togashi, Hiromu Arakawa, Masashi Kishimoto, and Hirohiko Araki. This list alone is already a who's who of the genre, but you cast the net out even further, and you'll see just how widespread the influence Kinnikuman had is. The biggest place to look for inspirations from Kinnikuman are fighting games, with games like Tekken and Street Fighter including moves from the series, like the Kinniku Buster, Longhorn Express, and Cross Bomber, as well as more out-of-the-way places like Killer 7, Castlevania Portrait of Ruin, and Yu-Gi-Oh! It's that special sort of famous in Japan where it has its own holiday. Every February 29th is Kinnikuman Day. And with what I've described, it's not hard to see how it earned it. After Suguru was crowned King of Muscle Planet at the end of Scramble for the Throne, though, things would turn sour in the real world for Yuta Tamago. See, while their story was wrapping up, a new one was beginning. One made by one of the very authors they had inspired. Dragon Ball revolutionized what shonen manga could be, and after its release, Kinnikuman was old news. The pair would become despondent and struggle to make a hit over the next few years, until finally finding success as they returned to Kinnikuman for the sequel series, Kinnikuman Nisei. Nisei's release in 1998 marked the beginning of a new wave of manga following the children of the original manga's hero as they tried to live up to their parents' legacy. Also, this wasn't published in Weekly Shonen Jump anymore. Now it was serialized in Weekly Playboy. Finally, a reason to buy these things besides the articles. Nisei would follow Kinnikuman Taro, the son of Suguru, as he fought to avoid becoming the best wrestler in the world, trying to go back to being a spoiled prince on his home planet. Kinnikuman Nisei and the anime adaptation that would follow are divisive. No, a sequel series following the main character's children is divisive? Get out of town! Some people find it as a worthy successor, others hate Montaro and feel the supporting cast is much weaker than the original. Regardless of how you feel, though, if you're a Kinnikuman fan, this series is such an important one, because it's the one that gave Yuta Tamago their confidence back. Like I said, the pair struggled to find success after Kinnikuman, and when Nisei released and had a positive reception, they said it was nice to know that fans hadn't forgotten about them. Nisei would also provide American fans the first ever recognizable release of a Kinnikuman property when it was adapted into Ultimate Muscle, the Kinnikuman Legacy. This was an adaptation of both the manga and anime by Viz and 4Kids Entertainment, the same company responsible for the Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, and One Piece dubs. While the reputation among American anime fans is pretty poor, there is one thing that even the biggest 4Kids haters can agree upon. Their adaptation of Kinnikuman Nisei was pretty good. The show itself already leans more silly and had far less censorship that needed to be done, but having rewatched a third of the series so far, it's got some really solid comedy writing to go along with it.
Squealer.
That's not necessary. So what if I betrayed my father to Mars, then betrayed Mars about the betrayal? I know 2 wrongs don't make a right, but I have 3 wrongs. That's equal to 1 right with a remainder of 1 wrong. That should reverse everything. I'm in the clear!
Moreover, they were oddly reverent for the source material, not changing many backstories despite never adapting the original series, and even reverting changes they had made so they could stay closer to the original. In the first few episodes, they called the Kinniku Buster the Butt Buster. But by episode 7, they switch it back to the original. It was even so popular in America that after the show was canceled in Japan due to low ratings, 4Kids pulled a Sonic X and ordered an additional 14 episodes to wrap the series up due to its overseas popularity. I call this the first recognizable adaptation of Kinnikuman, as, believe it or not, they actually made it over here all the way back in the 80s, when the original manga and anime were still running. Muscle, or Millions of Unusual Small Creatures Lurking Everywhere, was a Mattel toy line that was just a repackaged version of Kinkeshi, a line of gashapon toys released in Japan that were some of the most popular gashapon toys ever released. All they brought over were the toys, though, as for the storyline, you were kinda left out in the cold. All you got was that there were the Thug Busters, led by Muscle Man, and the Cosmic Crunchers, led by Terry Bull. But why is it that it took Kinnikuman so long to come to the West? It's such an important series, why weren't there companies who wanted to bring it to America? Oh. Remember how I said Kinnikuman's first wrestling arc was the Chojin Olympics? And how he had to fight Chojin from all over the world? You know how much worldly knowledge teenagers in 1970s Japan had? Yeah, pretty much every wrestler in the Olympics is a stereotype of some sort. And since Germany had to be represented, you already know where this is going. Welcome, Brockenman. Now please die. Brockenman is a Nazi. He's got swastikas akimbo, Nazi cheerleaders, does the Sieg Heil. You think it can't get much worse? Then he busts out the poison gas attack. And the announcer says, it's the return of the Nazi gas chambers. Holy shit. Brockenman, though, is little more than a villain of the week. He has one match against a lovable racist stereotype Ramen Man, and then leaves forever. In the manga, Ramen Man makes it quick and just rips him in half. In the anime, he turns him into noodles and eats him. Yeah, Japan actually loves Ramen Man, so he gets to have his own spin-off series despite looking like this and being Chinese. So the Nazi is dead. Good. But in comes Brocken Jr. Brocken Jr. is not a Nazi. You could show any other image to help me out right now. Any other image! I swear he's not a Nazi. Brocken Jr. is introduced in the Seven Samurai arc and is looking to get revenge on Ramen Man for killing his dad, and is not a Nazi. Ramen Man beats him and begins to mentor, not a Nazi, Brocken Jr., and puts him on the right path, teaching him, not a Nazi, that his father was a terrible person, and he has to move on from him to become a better wrestler, not a Nazi. Brocken Jr. would go on to become one of Kinnikuman's most trusted allies and a fan-favorite character. So you can imagine how hard it is to reckon with the shirt. He only packed so many clothes, he didn't expect to renounce the Aryan race before he got home. France would ban Kinnikuman due to having a good Nazi as a main character. He was excluded from both the Muscle toy line and Muscle NES game in America, And most bafflingly of all, got the French dub of Fist of the North Star turned into a comedy dub. Tangent, I know, but if you're not interested in what makes me interested, you would have quit a long time ago. So, in France, Fist of the North Star was a massive hit, and right up there with City Hunter, aka Nicky Larson, as the most popular anime in the country. However, in the middle of airing, the voice cast refused to do any more voices for the show, as they believe it had promoted Nazi ideals, a thing which Fist of the North Star doesn't do. What had happened was that some wires had been crossed and they'd confused the God's Army arc of Fist of the North Star with the Brockenman Controversy, and they thought they were working on the same show. The voice cast was unwilling to play ball unless they had final say on the script for the show, and decided to include more jokes and swap it from a straight-laced translation into a comedy dub. Think 4Kids, but they weren't even trying to tell a coherent story. This includes swapping every instance of Phoenix the Bird for Phoenix, the city in Arizona.
J'avais déclenché contre toi la technique des Phénix, Arizona, l'attaque le plus terrible de l'école Nanto. Tous ceux qui ont osé se dresser contre moi ont péri sous les griffes du Phénix, Arizona.
The worst part about the whole thing is that Brocken Jr. actually is a really good character. I like him a lot. But you can be sure I'll never get to own any merch of him due to that whole Nazi thing. I'm at least in the good company of a majority of female Kinnikuman fans, as Brocken Jr. has the highest female fan base in Japan. He's young, handsome, and wears a shirt that gets ripped open in every fight he's in to reveal his bodacious tatas. If Kinnikuman came out today, people would absolutely baby girl the Nazi. That's not what I meant! After the time tag arc of Nisei finally gave up and died, Yuta Tamago were ready to come back to the original series. And so began Kinnikuman 2011. Okay, so they kindly didn't give it a new subtitle to help differentiate the two, so from here on out, I'll be referring to 2011 as Perfect Origin. It's the name of the first new arc, it's the name of the new anime, it's a cool name. Perfect Origin is the result of the innovators of shonen manga returning to the series that started it all with 30 years more experience writing and crafting stories. Telling a fan in 1986 that they would shed tears for Springman, Kinnikuman Big Body, and Sneakator, who is a gator with all the powers of a sneaker, they'd think you were insane. But Perfect Origin doesn't just speak to an evolution of their manga, but an evolution of Yuta Tamago as people. Nuance and reasoning is added to even the most bland characters of the original series. When the Mountain, who is a giant chunk of rock who knows judo, has a beautiful message on the value of friendship, you know you're reading something special. They weren't satisfied giving people the same thing they had as children, and chose to evolve their characters to make them into real characters, instead of just one-note villains. Perfect Origin has been one of the best things I've had the pleasure of discovering over the past year, and I can't say enough good about it. I also can't say much about it, period, because of spoilers, but trust me, it's really good. You can read from Perfect Origin onwards, or watch the ongoing anime adaptation, which just began its second season, but if you want the best moments in this to hit the way they were intended, I implore you to read from the beginning. Because if you do, it goes from a great read to one of the best you could ever have. Alright, with all the babes sufficiently scared off with all this talk about manga, time to bring them back with what they really love, video games. The very first Kinnikuman video game was Kinnikuman for the PC-88 in 1984. A simulation RPG where you have to train up your own wrestler to fight all your favorites. The first proper fighting game would be released in the next year as Kinnikuman Coliseum Deathmatch for the MSX. And the first one to come to America would come in the same year, Kinnikuman Muscle Tag Team Match. It was of course branded as a muscle game instead of a Kinnikuman one, and like I said, it removed Brocken Jr. and replaced him with Geronimo, because the only place for Nazis on the NES was as exploding heads. From here, the amount of Kinnikuman games, let alone fighting games, would plummet, as the only one released between Tag Match and our first topic was Dirty Challenger on the Super Famicom. The very first Kinnikuman game to come stateside as a Kinnikuman game was Ultimate Muscle Legends vs. New Generation for the GameCube, released in 2002, published by Bandai, and developed by Aki. When it comes to wrestling games, they're the best to ever do it. No Mercy, WCW vs. NWO Revenge, the good Def Jam games, these guys know how to make a wrestling game fun. But for lack of a better descriptor, all of their games are more grounded. Yes, you are grounding Method Man's head into the pavement like a pogo stick, but they are more traditional wrestling games. What got me excited about them working on Ultimate Muscle was that this wasn't one of those. This is a 4-player... well, arena fighter isn't really the right phrase. I think the best way to describe it is as a 4-player baby crib. An amount of wrestlers are in the ring at a given time. Power-ups are thrown in at random, and at the end somebody has their chest caved in. Classic baby behavior. Knowing they'd be tackling something so in and out of their wheelhouse at the same time got me really interested for how much they could carry over from those games into this one. Starting the game... There's a creator wrestler here. I can feel it. This was the first thing I beelined for to see what options they'd give you, and it's both worse and better than what I was hoping for. Hearing this game let you make your own Chojin was enough to get me on board. But when you get in, you quickly learn that this game has about 9 or 10 different pre-built wrestlers you can pick parts from to mix and match into your own wrestler. It's a little sad we don't get a bunch of accessories and trinkets to make some sort of heinous freak, but given what parts you are given to work with, I can understand why they felt like this was enough. What I ended up loving the most was all the stuff that wasn't cosmetic. You can pick what faction your wrestler belongs to, what their personality is, where they're from, because Kinnikuman has this funny habit of saying the living kendama toy from outer space was born in Denmark. Let me introduce you to the latest Devil Chojin, Killman Jr. Infinity. After generations of Killmen, we finally crafted the ultimate devil machine. All it took was attaching the head of a dog. He finishes off his opponents with the deadly Rockin' Lock, and teaches a pottery class on weekends for retired Killmen. So you'd think that now that we've made Killman Jr. Infinity, we can move on to the next game, but there's actually a whole mini-game here based around grappling or something. Wrestling in this game is very basic. You have a strike button, a grapple button, a block button, and, completely unique for a wrestling game, a jump button. Most games never posit how a wrestler is supposed to go up without the use of the top rope, but here you can jump all around, attack, and grapple in midair, or springboard off the ropes for extra height. Grapples can also be modified by pressing certain buttons during them, like jump letting you launch your opponent really high in the air, or attack letting you whip them into the ropes. As for defensive options, you have the block, but tapping block while holding a direction will also let you quick step. This game is absolute chaos, and going in expecting anything like a WWE wrestling game is a great way to get your Kinniku busted. And I've seen this move in real life, you really don't want that. In a WWE game, you start slow with basic grapples and strikes before advancing up to your signatures and finishers. In Ultimate Muscle, it's much more intense from the word go, letting you rocket all around the ring with diving attacks. If there's one thing you can say this game doesn't have, it's downtime. This isn't a traditional wrestling game where big moves put you down for a few seconds to let your opponent pin you. No, the game would have to have pins for that to happen. No pinfalls, no submissions. Matches only end by knockout. And the quickest way to do that is by busting out signature moves. The lack of pinfalls makes sense when you realize, 2 matches in the entire series end by pinfall. The more you fight, the more your special meter will increase. And by holding down L while pressing either attack or grapple, you'll perform either a super move or a super grab. Attacks take 1 bar, can be done much quicker, and can sometimes be done while airborne, like with Dick Dick Van Dyck. Yeah, laugh in the poor guy's face, why don't ya? You'll learn to fear the name of Cock Penis Van Wiener. Grapples take 2 bars, are often more cinematic, and deal a hefty amount of damage more than the strikes. Save up all 3 bars and you can perform a cinematic level 3 move, your biggest damage dealer and flashiest move. The first time you land one in a match, it'll feel great! The second time you land one, the dread sinks in. Yeah, once you've seen a finisher once, you've seen it every time. And it can get really boring around the 3rd time you've seen it, and it only gets worse if all 3 of those times come in the same match. However, don't let that take away from the fact that this game is actually a lot of fun. The wrestling is stupid basic, but that makes it a phenomenal pick-up-and-play game. One of the quickest I ever learned. By the end of the first match, I knew what I was doing, and from there, had loads of fun. Adding to the insanity are items that get thrown into the ring every once in a while, like health and power-ups, but also bombs, debuffs, and lightning traps. Also, in something you have to be a dorky wrestling fan to appreciate, you can see where Aki recycled some of their older animations to reuse in this game. Kid Muscle gets the Uranagi, Dick gets the trapped knees, Wally Tuskett has the Rikishi sidekick, and I'm thankful that's all he has from Rikishi. The game is already fun enough on its own, but as soon as you add in multiple people, it becomes one of the most fun multiplayer games on the GameCube. Truly, this game was developed with the idea that most people would just bunch up into the corner and spam dive kicks while laughing about it. The simplicity means that just by button mashing, you're sure to have fun. And you can't really ask for much more from a goofy 4-player fighting game. If you do find yourself down 3 friends though, the game does feature a story mode for each character, with fully voiced routes that let you pick your battles before facing off with a final opponent in the end. This mode and tournament mode do suffer from the fact that they're just a series of back-to-back fights without anything to really break it up. But it's still fun, and the fact they're all voice-acted instead of just text boxes puts it above plenty of other licensed efforts. You also get new characters the more you play, including your friend and mine, Kinnikuman, who is so weak and pathetic, he's allowed to take a gun into the ring with him just to make things fair. You'll also notice you get muscle medals at the end of every match, and without a way to cash them out into real money, you might wonder what they're for. Well, you can use them in these virtual gashapon machines to collect Kinkeshi figures. All 416 of the original Kinkeshi figures are yours to collect, as well as the additional ones from the Nisei relaunch. This is a really cute addition. But there's a reason gacha games have the names they do. These machines often dole out multiple duplicates, and pumping in hundreds of coins only to net you a fraction of the figures doesn't feel great. If they had included a little bio or something, it would have been great, but as it is now, it's still a cute distraction, but a distraction and nothing more. Overall, Legends vs. New Generation is a really good wrestling game, but specifically if you're playing with other people. The characters all play too similarly, and the single-player options are all too limited for me to say it's really worth your time if you want to go in alone. If you have a few friends willing to try it out, though, this is a game you'll be happy to have on standby for game nights. The game would get 2 further revisions in the form of Kinnikuman Muscle Generation for PSP, and Galactic Wrestling featuring Ultimate Muscle for PS2. Who the hell is featuring them? It's their game. Neither game adds much to what Legends vs. New Generation did, so let's briefly go over the differences. Galactic Wrestling ditches the cel-shaded art style, which I honestly prefer. One look at Kinnikuman between the two, and it's obvious the change was for the better. The gameplay is significantly slower and worse, with the removal of power-ups making it much closer to a standard wrestling game, of which this game is not a good one. The camera is much tighter, and the AI is much harder. Fights that in Legends vs. New Generation could be handled with mashing now require careful planning and loads of cheese. Ground grapples were added, but to the game's detriment, as the AI can now trap you on the ground without a chance to fight back due to the game's poor counter system. I do so love being trapped in 5 consecutive arm bars with no way to get out. Create a Wrestler and Story Mode, two of the bigger single-player options, were both removed, and the new Survival Mode is not nearly enough to make up for their loss. The roster, compared to Legends vs. New Generation, is massive, and includes fan favorites like Black Hole, Ashura Man, and the Hell's Missionaries, as well as various alternate costumes from the original manga. There are now special openings for when you recreate fights from the original show, fully voiced as well, and again sticking to the original manga's story. They kept in stuff like Robin Mask having history with Neptune Man as Quarrel Man, Wars Man giving Ramen Man brain damage, or Prince Kamehame passing on the title of Kinnikuman Great to Terry Man. I swear to God he's not a Nazi! I swear to God that's not blackface! His body is as strong as iron, so they thought, well, we'll just make him black and then give him Kinnikuman's lips, so it's not blackface. Now this is blackface. They even refer back to the original manga over the anime, like when Brocken Jr. says Ramen Man split his father in two, something that doesn't happen in the anime, but does happen in the manga. The voice acting itself is, overall, really good. Sure, Eric Stewart has to bust out his Asian guy voice a few too many times, but there are plenty of good performances. Mark Thompson as Kid Muscle, Ted Lewis as Kevin Mask, and Wayne Grayson as Checkmate and Neptune Man are some of the highlights. But at the top has to be J. David Brimmer as Sunshine. I can't imagine him sounding any other way.
Beetlebomb, you're such a cream puff, but you don't know real fear until you witness the horror of the sandpit.
Cherish the day! Finally, the House of Mask, our bloodline that was attacked in this past generation by that pretender, King Muscle, shall exact its revenge!
No way, it can't be! Is that you, Dad? Oh man, I don't believe it! I thought for sure I was gonna get matched up against some big-time legend like Warsman or even Neptune Man. I can't fight you, Dad!
Overall, Ultimate Muscle featuring Galactic Wrestling is a fine enough game, but the added pizzazz with more characters and intros can't offset the fact that the gameplay is just worse. Finally is Kinnikuman Muscle Generation for PlayStation Portable, this time exclusive to Japan. I'll keep this even briefer, seeing as on the third go-around, I surprisingly have less to say about the game. This is better than Galactic Wrestling, but I still think Legends vs. New Generation is the best one. This does away with the pre-match dialogue from Galactic Wrestling, but plays faster. It doesn't have Create a Wrestler, but it does have Kinnikuman Soldier. This guy sells the game on his back. Kinnikuman Soldier is so goddamn popular. How can the main character playing dress-up as a G.I. Joe be not just more popular, but leagues more popular than the actual main character? Read the damn book and find out. It also kinda brings back story mode in the form of character-specific arcade towers, a la Smash Ultimate. Overall, it's a good game and really shows how graphically nice the PSP can be when it's exactly on par with the PS2 version, but after playing all three of these things, I've definitely concluded that it peaked with the first game. It might be the least nice looking, but it damn sure is the most fun to play. Now, the GameCube and PS2 games were the only ones we ever got in America. Like I said, the PSP game is stuck in Japan, but as long as we're pilfering, we might as well pick up something for the home consoles too. See, Aki didn't just work on the party fighter side of things. As in the arcades, we got a much more traditional fighting game called Kinnikuman Muscle Grand Prix. This was a 3D fighter, which played closer to something like Tekken rather than Power Stone, and both it and its sequel would come to the PlayStation 2, with the game we're covering being Muscle Grand Prix 2 Tokumori, the sequel's expanded revision. All we're missing by not covering the original is their story mode, which does cover the original story up until the end of the Devil Knights arc. Not only does Tokumori add to this by including the rest of the series, the Dream Tag Arc characters and the 5 Fated Princes from Scramble for the Throne, it also includes more Nisei characters, like Scarface, Terry the Kid, and Barrier Freeman. Not enough time in the day to go over what the fuck is wrong with this guy. It's like his colostomy bag has a guy in it, and neither of them are happy about it. Tokumori also adds a tournament, practice, collection, and special mode, all of which are brand new to the Grand Prix games. Practice is gonna be really useful for me, since I find I'm actually really good at fighting games when the opponent doesn't move or fight back. Let's keep it basic and start with good old Suguru. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know it was gonna be like this. Fans of watching Japanese men die might be familiar with this announcer, as she's Lenny Hart, the ring announcer for Japanese MMA promotions like Pride, Dream, and Rizin. Her voice is iconic for fans of combat sports, and anybody familiar with fighting games would recognize her as the voice of the announcer from Tekken 8. And fans of being weirdos might recognize her as Axel from Mega Man X7. Why the hell is this not a thing I'm lying about? Anyway, her announcing in Muscle Grand Prix is so good. Her voice gives the game this feeling of being a big event simply by how hard she tries. Though, try and tell which one of these is a reused voice line of hers from Muscle Generation. Of all the characters to mess up, they really picked the worst one. Picking a character has another layer to it, aside from just who sounds like they'd be the most fun to play as depending on which button you press when selecting, you'll get a different costume. Both anime and manga colors, as well as a different costume from specific arcs, like Kinnikuman's Scramble for the Throne costume, Terryman as Kinnikuman Great, Sunshine as New Sunshine, and Big the Budo as Neptune King. Add on to that the stages, which span the entire franchise, and the background music, which uses tons of anime remixes, and you can feel the love for Kinnikuman bouncing off of the screen. Now it's time to talk about gameplay. Oh, damn it, do I gotta wear the fighting game dunce cap again? After selecting your character, you get introduced to the first new mechanic of the game, Burning Inner Strength. These are your grooves out of Capcom vs. SNK, or ISMs in Alpha 3. Each one of them represents a special state your character can enter when your back's against the wall, and each color correlates to a style of recovery. Blue makes your basic attacks stronger and makes you move faster. Green gives you super armor and reduces damage taken, and red will buff your special moves, letting you perform them for cheaper and giving them extra damage. Mixing and matching these special modes, not only to fit your playstyle, but also your character, is super important when picking the game up. Before even learning a character, this choice influences so much about how you play and what you focus on. It makes Muscle Grand Prix so much more interesting than it might seem on the outside. It's a lot of fun getting in, and you would never guess that this team only ever worked on sports simulation games instead of serious one-on-one fighting games, because the controls are great. You only have one attack button, that being a basic 3-hit string, with a grapple, special, and guard button backing it up. Saying this game has depth with only one real attack button sounds silly, but trust me, getting into the combos, and there's plenty you can do with just this. Your basic strings are usually that 3-hit combo, modified by what direction you hold when you hit, usually on the first or last hit, sometimes requiring 2 different directions mid-combo. It reminds me a lot of the Rumblefish, being a 3-hit fighter that requires you to use your other tools to extend, those in this case being your special and grapple moves. If you're one of those people who can't stand grapplers in fighting games, it's not even worth getting upset about this one. Everybody's a grappler. For grapples, you can either throw them out raw, or string them into your combos when your opponent is staggered. You get different grapples based not just on when you use them, but if you do an input alongside them, and if the opponent is facing away or not. Grapples are quick and visceral. It's a great feeling to end out a long combo with a satisfying slam, and it makes you want to see just how far you can get in before having to rely on the grab. The easiest way to extend combos is with a special move, with your combos either setting up for them or stringing along with them very naturally. They range from single strong hits to flashy grapples, all the way up to level 9 killer moves that can end a match in an instant. Unless you're Banky Man, in which case you can end the fight whenever you want. These special moves can also be combos themselves, requiring input after input to keep them up. Stuff like Kinnikuman's Furin Kazan, Warsman's Palo Special, or Robin's Special Course of Death, you have to keep the inputs up at specific times to keep the move going. Both the skill floor and ceiling for this game are deceptively low and high. You can get a basic grasp for how the game flows and what combos you can easily learn out of the gate, but the more you learn, the more you'll see how much this game is hiding. The characters I gravitated towards as I started out included Brocken Jr., unfortunately, who has a really easy-to-learn string using just directions rather than traditional inputs. Big Body clearly favors raw damage over flashy strings, Springman has great range and fun special moves, and Black Hole has a really fun playstyle, having loads of branches off of a repeatable cartwheel move. The two characters I played the most, though, were Stikisei King and Robin Mask. Stikisei was definitely more out of me loving him rather than loving his playstyle. Look at him! He's an adorable walking cassette player who cleans out his connectors at the beginning of a round. Stikisei King is adorable, and I love him. However, don't make the mistake of clicking square when you pick him, or instead of Stikisei King, you'll get Harold, who is his ugly redesign from the anime. This guy eats socks for a living and has only felt the touch of a woman when being slapped. Since Stikisei has his Chojin encyclopedia that gives him access to everyone's moves, they gave him the highest amount of specials in the game, having one for every situation. In the show, he ends up losing when he puts in Kinnikuman's tape and plays it, only to find out it's a tape of Kinnikuman from 3 years ago when he was a coward, and it causes him to lose his spine. They adapted this into the game by making it his getaway dash. Is this many moves practical? No, not at all. But for how good they did adapting my favorite Devil Chojin, I had to like it. Robin Mask is both fun and practical though, because he's a really good character. His pokes are really strong and fast. His combos are easy to pull off, and he has a wide variety of utility supers. I will say that what made me stick with Robin Mask was this combo. It's the first thing I learned with him, and when I say I was giddy after successfully learning it, I mean I was way too excited to learn a fighting game combo. It's just so cool looking and satisfying to pull off, and I was happy when I finally nailed it. This catch out of the air tower bridge is the entire reason I play Robin Mask, I won't even lie. You can show this move off in arcade mode, which will pit you against a few different opponents on your way to either take on Akuma Shogun or Super Phoenix. And because this was first released in arcades, Super Phoenix is an absolute ballbuster. Is it any wonder this guy's the only one you see winning competitive events? They forgot to ban the boss characters! You may notice as you fight, though, that you're collecting these little coins. Well, fear not, there's no Kenkeshi figures in this game, no need to start over from zero. Instead, these coins mean something much more. See, whenever you get one of these coins, it means you copied a moment from the original anime. Whether that's performing a tower bridge on Kinnikuman, or doing a reverse tower bridge to Junkman. If you do the moment, you'll unlock an anime still showing off the moment. But wait, they're in black and white? That's because you didn't get it quite right. If you want a colorized version, you have to do it with the correct costume equipped and be on the right stage. So if you do the Robin special to Kinnikuman Mariposa, you get the colorized version, because you perfectly emulated the version from the anime. This is such a cool way to do what so many other anime games do and include stills from the anime as unlockables. Actually performing these moments and making it feel like an achievement. Doubly so when you accurately perform the moves is an ingenious idea, and one I can't believe isn't used in every anime game. Once you finish arcade mode, you can try out tournament mode, which is really where the game being in Japanese is an issue because I have no idea what any of this means. I think it's set up that you can play through specific tournament setups as whoever you want, which, if I'm right, is a really neat way to do it. Of course, I could be wrong, so don't check. While this game does do away with team battles, a mode in the previous games, it does make up for it with 2 whole other games. That's right, the original 2 Famicom Kinnikuman games are included here as a side attraction. Touching briefly on the competitive scene, and it's dense. You have a Mizumi page that details frame data and meter gain for every move in the game on most characters, a Discord filled with helpful information all about the game, and plenty of tournament footage from as recently as 2023. Sure, it'll only really be useful to see how to beat Super Phoenix, which you can't, but still, for a Japan-exclusive fighting game, there are so many resources for how to get better. Speaking of those tournament videos, it does show an unexpected top tier. Dare I say, a silly one? The Mountain. Now, in a fight against most people and a Giant Rock has my vote. But the Mountain is a real one-hit wonder. As in, he only has one thing that is making him top tier. He has a grounded projectile super that does this. Hilarious. Overall, I'd say that Muscle Grand Prix 2 Tokumori has been one of my favorite parts about becoming a Kinnikuman fan. Getting to play a fighting game that's so unique, so deep, and yet so approachable has been a blast. I recommend any fighting game fan to at least try the game and see if it's your speed. I would love to see the community around this game expand. I would also like to see that scene where Suguru beats Super Phoenix on repeat for an hour or two, that'd be nice. Now, from here, Kinnikuman is trapped in mobile game hell, with only high-quality art of every no-named loser in the show to show for it. But there is one more game. And it's barely playable in its current state, but I think playability is second in this case to just how wonderful this game really is. Welcome Kinnikuman Muscle Fight for the PC. Released back in 1998, Muscle Fight is a 1v1 2D fighting game made by fans. The original build was developed in Japan by Mayaton, a Japanese developer in the 2D Fighter Maker engine. This game has to be one of, if not the longest supported fan game of all time, seeing regular roster additions up until this very day. Now, how do you play this? Do you really want to know? Let's leave it at this. Lupine Calibrator on Twitch is a goddamn saint, because they walked me step by step through the process of installing Muscle Fight, even after I failed to understand their instructions about 3 separate times. You have to trick your computer into thinking it's Japanese. After getting the game to run, you'll have a few different options, which Lupine was kind enough to help me translate, which are Free Battle, Arcade Mode, and Tournament Mode. Arcade Mode? What you would expect. A bunch of fights all back to back with a big boss fight at the end. Which boss fight? Take your pick. Tournament Mode is Tournament Mode, but has various different settings that you can unlock by beating Arcade Mode. You can unlock a Scramble for the Throne style tournament, a tag team tournament, or just the standard tournament mode. This will give you incentive to try out a few of the game's 90 playable characters. These characters aren't just the ones you'd expect, like Kinnikuman and the other idol Chojin. No, this includes dozens of deep-cut characters from one-and-done jobbers, characters from forgotten anime arcs, every single Scramble for the Throne team member for every Fated Prince, Kinnikuman lady characters, don't got the time in the day to talk about it, even having altered versions of characters depending on the arcs. You've got basic Kinnikuman, but also Scramble for the Throne Kinnikuman. You have Soldier and Super Phoenix, but also Omega Centauri arc Soldier and Super Phoenix. This game even has lost media, as there are some Kinnikuman Nisei characters that were created for it, but the files to play as them are pretty much impossible to come by. With a roster so big, you might ask how Mayaton was able to make them all, and how they're still making them to this day. Well, that's the reason I think Muscle Fight is worth discussing, and why I'd call it one of the greatest fan projects of all time. It's communal. This isn't just the work of Mayaton or any one person. Every one of the different characters in Muscle Fight was made by somebody else. Sure, there are a few characters created by the same people, but aside from the basic characters it would have started out with, Muscle Fight owes its entire roster to the community surrounding it. Even those original characters that would have been there from the beginning have had to be rebalanced and modified as the game goes along. And you want to know the best part? Because every character was created by somebody passionate enough to take the time to make it, there are no dud characters. From the gag characters based on toys, to the warring gods, every character is made with love and appreciation. They take a character like Pinchman, who does not matter until the most recent arc, and they gave him a real moveset, with some flashy super moves to boot. Nobody should put the effort in to design multiple unique backgrounds for Mr. VTR, who is a camera with a man attached to it. But they did! Stekase King, looking cuter than ever, gets a bunch of game original transformations he never had in the manga, even going all the way up to copying the final boss. In cases of characters who either had a small amount of dialogue or, in the case of newer 2011 characters, no voice at all, they'll also use sentence mixing in order to get the lines they need for round intros and wins. It's a special type of charming to hear the voice lines broken up the way they are, even if it's in a language I don't understand. The biggest reason the characters have to be as intricate as they are is because of the main feature that makes Muscle Fight a joy to watch. It's anime accuracy. Playing any anime game, at some point you're gonna want to recreate fights from the source material. And since Muscle Fight is a fan game, that means the devs wanted to see the same thing. Almost every character has a special animation that triggers when fighting a character they fought in the original manga. These range from secret special moves that can only be triggered under certain conditions, secret cutscenes, or even counter supers that you can use to break out of an opponent's mid-move. In Kinnikuman's fight with Buffalo Man reverses the Kinniku Buster by flipping over. And in Muscle Fight, you can perform the same counter. Same with Super Phoenix and the Kinniku Driver. Most of these just exist to make Suguru's life worse. Except against Stekase King, funny enough. If you use his Devil Symphony against Kinnikuman, it'll end like it does in the show, where the broadcast gets cut off and gives him the chance to escape, because Stekase King didn't read the radio schedule. These special animations can also be references themselves, like Neptune Man getting Buster Wolf as one of his supers, or Pinchman getting Dirty Buffalo. They'll even reference other Yuditamago manga, like Warsman's secret special move where he summons Scrap Sandeo, a cop who's made of trash, who actually had a cameo from Warsman in his own series. There are way too many instances of unique animations to go over. A compilation of most of these clock in at about 40 minutes. So, instead I want to talk about the game's crowning achievement in this regard, and massive spoilers for Perfect Origin Arc's ending, but it's the final fight between Strong the Budo and Akuma Shogun. The people who worked on these two characters had such a deep appreciation for the source material, and it bleeds into every part of their moveset. The amount of animations, counters that counter counters, and mid-match cutscenes that accompany a Strong vs. Akuma Shogun fight make every one a mini-movie. The special dramatic ending is a note-for-note remake of the final clash from their fight, and it's done absolutely beautifully. Right, boys? What you got for round two? Any scene of note you can think of from the original manga can be recreated, and it makes this game an unbelievable playthrough for a Kinnikuman fan of any level. Speaking of playthroughs, you might have noticed that we haven't talked about the controls. Well, this game ain't a huge amount of fun. It's a basic 3-button fighter on a game engine older than me. It's janky, clunky, and all sorts of awkward. I can't really recommend this if you're looking for a proper, well-made fighting game. God, is it not a proper fighting game. You know one of the problems with every character being fan-made? I'm not going through all the trouble of animating, coding, and creating a D tier. Certain characters in this game just have such insane stuff they can do that reasonably fighting them is near impossible. As a game, it shows every second of its age. As a fan work, though, I can't bring myself to say anything negative. This is one of the greatest fan works I've ever seen, and represents so much love put into this series from a community that holds it so dearly. If you're as crazy as I am and want to practice cold fusion to get the game working, it's best to do so as a sort of toy box to watch CPUs fight each other. But if you're really interested, you can also check out compilations and fan animations using Muscle Fight. Muscle Fight Movie on YouTube hacked together a remake of the series through Scramble for the Throne using editing tricks and Muscle Fight. Even if the game isn't worth it in the long run, I truly hope Muscle Fight never stops getting updates. Any series would be lucky to have a fan project with even 1/10 the love that Muscle Fight does. And it couldn't have happened to a better series.